Tales from the Crypt debuted on June 10th, 1989, ran for 7 seasons, 93 episodes, and came to an end on July 19th, 1996. Now, if you were to take a guess, how would you think this long-running anthology show would end? Zombie lover rising from the grave? A mentally disturbed Santa Claus stalking some poor woman? Maybe a beloved superhero turning his restaurant into an all-you-can-eat human buffet? Well, if any of those were your answer, well, you'd be dead wrong, because all of those came earlier in the series, stupid. But if you answered an adult animated version of the Three Little Pigs, well, I'd give you a gold star. The third pig is just that, an almost Ren and Stimpy-esque gross-out tale about the Three Little Pigs. Now, why would you end a horror anthology show with something that looks like it was made for Nickelodeon? I have no idea, but for directors Bill Kopp and Patrick A. Ventura, it was something of a passion project. Both men had already had an extensive background in animation. Bill Kopp was best known for being a writer on and the voice of Eek the Cat.
Gee, I'm sorry, fellas. Look, you guys stay right here and I'll go get you a new piece of glass. Don't go away.
While Ventura worked as a gag man during Disney's revival arc in the 80s, and eventually would go on to help do some story work for the critically acclaimed Aladdin. If only these two men knew what would be waiting for them in their future. Like I've already mentioned, but the third pig is literally an adult animated version of the Three Little Pigs. You've got your pigs, Dudley, voiced by legendary voice actor Cam Clark.
Could you be a little more quiet? I thought that the city was having a riot.
Likely best known as Leonardo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, though he's done voice work for like a million different things. Then there's Drinky, voiced by Brad Garrett, who's probably best known as Robert on Everybody Loves Raymond.
And so you see, brother dear, we've got nowhere to go.
And then there's Smokey, voiced by Charlie Adler, who's another legendary voice actor, providing the voice of Starscream in the Michael Bay Transformer movies, and also doing many voices on Eek the Cat alongside Bill Kopp.
What are you looking at?
And of course you can't have your three pigs without the Big Bad Wolf, voiced by comedian Bobcat Goldthwait, who I'm sure everyone knows. You might not know what he looks like, but the second you hear his voice, you'll know exactly who he is.
When I find a way in, that's when I attacks. And soon I'll be dining on sweet baby backs.
The Big Bad Wolf does what the Big Bad Wolf does best, huffs and puffs and blows all the pigs' houses down. Like in the original story, when he gets to the final house, he just doesn't seem to have the lung power. Though I do like how he's somehow able to blow so hard that his lower body comes out of his mouth. I don't know exactly how that works, but we are dealing with toon logic here.
I'll get you damn pigs if it's the last thing I do. Oh, what rhymes with you?
For the most part, all the dialogue in the story is done in rhymes to sort of fit that children's story vibe they're going for, but there's also a running gag where the wolf keeps having trouble rhyming. I wouldn't call it funny, but it's something, I guess. Also, there's a strange hiccup in the animation, because it looks like you can see the edge of the background. I don't know if that's what it is, but then it sort of disappears and seems to blend in naturally. Anywho, Drinky and Smokey move in with Dudley, who's way too nice for his own good. And if you haven't noticed yet, but this episode is really going for that shocking, edgy cartoon vibe that a lot of cartoons were doing way back in the 90s. I mean, it's all very sexual and gross out, and being that this was on HBO, they were able to get away with a lot more than they could have on basic television. Another interesting thing is this is the only episode in the series that is narrated by the Crypt Keeper himself, John Cassier.
Drinky only thought about one thing. Well, maybe two things.
Executive producer Joel Silver insisted that if they were gonna do this, it had to stay true to the Tales from the Crypt format, meaning the Crypt Keeper would narrate the story. In fact, voice actor Jess Harnell was initially hired to narrate the cartoon in a Beatles-like Ringo Starr voice, but Silver decided it really should be the Crypt Keeper narrating.
Yeah, we're out of bed. Now get to the store.
I'll go to the store, but you better beware.
Dudley decides to get his brother's beer, but just as he leaves, the Big Bad Wolf shows up. Why he wants the pigs inside the house and not the one that just left the home, I have no idea. Since huffing and puffing doesn't seem to work, he instead uses the centerfold to a pet pig magazine. Although I don't know why he did, because the Big Bad Wolf just kicks down the door anyways.
Looks like two little piggies, but where's the third?
The episode then gets excessively violent and gory, so much so that even though it's a cartoon, I have no idea if I can even show this on CensorTube. Once the wolf is done with his baby back ribs, Dudley returns to find his brothers, well, everywhere.
The address on the house is pig number 3. Jesus Christ! There's a severed head on the TV!
There is something kinda funny about the pig still talking in rhymes while he tells the police about his brothers who are pretty much hacked to pieces. When the police arrive, it turns out they're all wolves. How Dudley doesn't notice this when he's supposed to be the smart pig, I have no idea.
You killed both your brothers 'cause they drank all your beer!
Dudley is quickly taken in and put on trial. He of course is found guilty and sentenced to death by frying pan. I hope they don't forget the applesauce. While in jail, Dudley wishes to see his brothers one last time, to which they appear to him as ghosts. His brothers help free him from jail and then tell him he has to get revenge on the wolf. Now, if they're able to free him from the jail, why can't they just kill the wolf themselves? Dudley is taken to a spooky mansion, and the show suddenly switches from Three Little Pigs to Frankenstein.
You can learn how from reading this book. It's an ancient grimoire, but just take a look.
Dudley gets to work using his brother's mangled corpses to build his zombie pig, and just like in Frankenstein, brings his creation to life with electricity. Dudley orders the monster to kill the wolf. Meanwhile, the wolf is gloating over his murders, though I'm not sure why these rabbits are hanging out with the wolf. Also, I have my doubts that Little Bo Peep would have anything to do with the big bad wolf. The big bad wolf goes for a late night walk through the woods and is confronted by Frankenham. The zombie pig eats the wolf, but Dudley starts having second thoughts for some reason. I mean, the wolf killed his brothers. Why would he be feeling remorse now? The zombie pig returns. Dudley tries to kill it, though according to the zombie, you can't kill what's already dead. Dudley manages to electrocute the zombie using a banana, which seems to kill it, but not the wolf, who's still somehow alive.
I love this ending. I think it's neat. And I have only one thing to say. Pork, the other light meat!
The third pig really is one of the strangest finales to any show I've ever seen, and unlike the rest of the series, is one of the only episodes not to be based on an EC comic. I think the only other episode not based on a comic is the Season 4 episode King of the Road, despite the fact it's saying that it comes from Two-Fisted Tales, which it does not. Instead, we have a story based on the Three Little Pigs, one of the most enduring European folktales, first appearing in print in the 1840s, though the story itself is believed to be much older. The most famous version comes from English storyteller Joseph Jacobs, and it's the one most people know. 3 pigs each build a house, one of straw, one of sticks, and one of bricks, and the big bad wolf tries to blow them all down. Over the years, the story has been retold countless times in children's books, cartoons, and fairy tale adaptations, usually as a moral lesson about hard work and preparedness, which makes it pretty funny that Tales from the Crypt looked at it and said, yeah, but what if we made it more violent and way more disgusting? So why adapt the Three Little Pigs as the show's swine song? Get it? Swan song? Swine? Well, the original idea was to adapt the story for the Saturday morning spin-off, Tales from the Crypt Keeper. However, not surprisingly, the concept was deemed to be too violent for the kids' show. Instead, they decided to use it as a way of closing out the main series. The show was being cancelled anyway, so might as well do something off the walls and very different from what fans are used to. Stylistically, the third pig feels right at home with other gross cartoons of the 90s. The big one obviously being Ren and Stimpy, though as someone who was never really a fan of, or even allowed to watch Ren and Stimpy, I never really understood the appeal. To be fair though, when this came out, the idea of gory cartoons was still a fairly new idea, and hadn't been completely run into the ground by the internet. Though you could say that Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons did a pretty good job at making a mockery of the whole thing. This feels like a product of its time, something that I think would have played a lot better back in the mid-90s than it does now in the mid-2020s, oh dear god. Tales from the Crypt has always been about morbid humor, so it's not like the episode is really that far off base from the average Crypt episode. I mean, at its core, it's about someone raising the dead to get revenge, which is definitely on brand. So even though it looks like a Ren and Stimpy cartoon dipped in pig guts, thematically, it's still very Tales from the Crypt. revenge, resurrection, and a really dark sense of humor. From an animation standpoint, the episode was animated by Nelvana and Wang Film Productions, making it one of the only adult-themed cartoons the studio ever did. Another one being the 1983 animated film Rock'n'Roll, which honestly, this is the first time I've ever even heard about this movie, but the animation looks pretty awesome. I guess its $30,000 box office return on an $8 million budget is probably why I've never heard of it. Anyway, Nelvana was mostly into more kid-friendly productions like the Star Wars cartoons Ewoks and Droids, Eek the Cat, and My Pet Monster. But this was something much different. The characters were crude and rough around the edges, and I just don't mean their personalities either, but also how they were drawn. There's just something about them that feels like you'd only find them in some underground comic book that no one but that one 20-year-old who's still in high school would know about. Despite the rough animation, the voice work is all top-notch. I mean, these guys are all pros, so even for something as silly as this, they do all give it their best. And it's nice to have the Crypt Keeper himself hang out and narrate the story. The reception for the third pig is definitely mixed amongst critics and fans. Though, let's be honest here, how many critics are actually taking their time out to talk about Tales from the Crypt? Some fans seem to think this episode is skip-worthy, and others think it's one of the best. For me, it's never really worked. Though to be honest, the final season of Tales from the Crypt as a whole is kind of a slog to get through. Production for the 7th season moved from the United States to the UK, and it just feels like an entirely different show. Though this is probably the standout just because of how different it is. So even though the third pig isn't exactly what people would picture in their heads when they think of a Tales from the Crypt finale, but it almost feels fitting in a weird way. By the end of its run, the series had already gone through so many tonal shifts. Closing things out with a bizarre, gory fairy tale parody kind of sums up where the franchise had drifted. It's strange, crude, and darkly funny, and depending on who you ask, it's either a win or a total misfire. Do you see this as a bold way to end the series, or do you feel Tales from the Crypt should have gone out with something more traditional? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, I hope the new year is treating you right, and stay spooky.
That's all, folks.
Huge thanks to all my channel members, you're the real MVPs of the Spooky Squad. Your support helps keep the lights flickering and the monsters fed. If you'd like to join up and help support the channel, check out the join button below. But no pressure, just watching and liking helps a ton too.